Hello, everyone. This is Ethics in Dealing with the Sales Staff. So are quotas really the way? It was probably a few days ago. I was reading an article, just so happened to stumble across, about Wells Fargo. It was written by Emily Glazer for the Wall Street Journal, and how they were setting unrealistic sales goals for every single one of their staff members. The article even goes on to say that each guest, or each customer, should I say, of Wells Fargo had somewhere in the vicinity of 6 to 7 different accounts with a bank. There are not that many different types of accounts that, the average Joe, quote unquote, has. So how did they have so many people with so many different accounts? Well, it's simple, really. There was so much pressure on the sales staff to sell, and get people signing up for all these different services, writing loans, all this stuff, that some of these people, in order to keep their jobs, they did something a little unethical. What they did was they went ahead and signed up customers for all kinds of different accounts that they didn't even approve. So, if you're a Wells Fargo customer and it happened to you, this is the reason why it was especially bad in Arizona. There was one other state, but I forget from the article which other state it was. But people lost their jobs, from doing this and overseeing these unethical practices in order to meet sales quotas from upper management, the C-level management. And so there were veterans who had been there 20-some-odd years who lost their jobs because they couldn't keep up with the new sales goals. Clearly they weren't bad employees because they had stayed employed there for 20-something, I think the article said 24 years or something like that. One lady got fired after 24 years. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the number. Just because you couldn't keep up with the sales goals and the sales quotas. And the people who were doing all of the unethical opening of accounts, and also, not to mention, illegal opening of accounts, especially since banks tend to charge fees for their annual fees for their accounts to keep open a checking account or savings account or something like that. So they're charging people money that they didn't agree to pay, most likely. And so they were either doing that or they were quitting their jobs. So these people had jobs, but they were having to quit because the sales quotas were just too much. So that kind of segues into this whole idea of servant leadership. So what in the world is servant leadership? This is the exact opposite of the micromanagement and I guess the blocking out of people's suggestions that we just heard about in the Wells Fargo example. The link to that article is in the bibliography if you wanted to check out the Wells Fargo article. But servant leadership, in a nutshell, servant leadership is being able to listen to your employees to make yourself a better manager. So you can read on the PowerPoint here. Servant leader focuses primarily on the growth and well-being of people and the communities to which they belong, while traditional leadership generally involves the accumulation and exercise of power by one at the top of the pyramid. Servant leadership is different. The servant leader shares power, puts the needs of others first, and helps people develop and perform as highly as possible. Now, this is what motivates the people in the organization that I work for. People who are willing to invest their time and making the people who work for them better than they already are, giving them opportunities to stand out. And people who, or I shouldn't say people, I should say leaders and managers who know that they don't know everything because they're not the ones out there on the floor every day. Yes, they used to most likely be salespeople in this case, but they may have been out of the sales game for a while, and every job changes all the time. You're always learning, you're always needing to acquire new knowledge. Now, I just added a little bullet point here from my own thoughts at the bottom. In order to motivate others in a changing labor force environment, like I just mentioned, we must take the feelings and experiences of those we manage into consideration when making decisions as a leader. In my opinion, and also in experiences that I've witnessed, whenever you're willing to listen to the other people, they're willing to listen to you. In order to influence others, you have to be influenced. So keep that in mind. So how managers can keep their employees engaged. These are just going to be a series of graphs that I found online that I thought were pretty interesting in talking about the ethical consideration in keeping sales staff. So employees whose managers are open and approachable are more engaged. You can see here from the graph, here I'll even pull out the mouse for this one. People who strongly agree that their managers are open and approachable and more engaged, they are also 54% engaged. You know, you're always going to have the people who are not engaged because there's people working jobs who are just working jobs either to work jobs, to say they have a job, or to collect a paycheck. Not everyone's working the job that they want to work, or that they are working because they want to work it. And then there's 6% of people are actively disengaged. But you come here to the strongly disagree. This is what, about 1%, 2% strongly disagree, 2% are engaged, where 65% are actively being disengaged from their manager. Now, this is probably the group of people who are going to feel like they're not being treated properly, who aren't having their thoughts and concerns heard, and so they're trying to distance themselves from their managers. So for the goal-setting managers, these are the people who set performance goals based on the people that they work for, or the people that work for them. Now, I know my company, for example, it is a part of the organization is sales. And so they have what is called a rolling average, and people can earn bonuses and perks, things like that, for being able to sell consistently the amount of cars that they are able to sell based on their skill level. Clearly, as they get better, their rolling average is going to move up, but their managers are trying to keep them engaged by setting performance goals that meet their needs. Not something that's so ridiculous that they can't get, or being a brand new employee, you're not going to come in and sell 30 cars a month. You might be able to sell 4 or 5, and so that's where their average is going to be. So, just looking at the graphic here again, people who strongly agree that their managers help them set performance goals are 69%. 69% of those folks are engaged, and then only looks like about 2%, 3% are actively disengaged. Where all the people who strongly disagree, it's about the same for number 7 too, at least on the angle on my computer screen right now. About maybe 5%, 6%, something like that, are engaged, and then 53% are actively disengaged. Now, employees whose managers focus on their strengths are more engaged. Now, this is not so much performance goals, but what they're actually good at doing. If they're good at talking on the phone, if they're good at meeting people in person, If they're good at giving presentations, these are the types of things that a manager can focus on to help them become a better salesperson, and allowing them to incorporate more of that in the sales environment. Again, looking at the graph of those who strongly agree that their managers are focusing on their strengths, 67% are engaged. Looks like about, I'm seeing now the numbers add up. 98, so 2%. And you look here, for those who, 2% are actively disengaged. And for those who strongly disagree, we're looking at like 90, so 2% who are engaged versus 71% who are actively disengaged. And here is the bibliography. You're more than welcome to pause it here. And I'll also kind of read over this real quick in case you want to click on one of these or write it down, copy it, something like that. The Wells Fargo bibliography there is the link to that article. It says, in case you're interested more on what servant leadership actually is. And then this is just the list of the Gallup polls. Thank you very much.